You're listening to episode 186 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. And hey, it's becoming that time where, and I have a question. Are you the guy who eats Thanksgiving dinner and then goes shopping, or are you the guy who eats Thanksgiving dinner and then sleeps for 2 days and watches football? Which one do you do, Ron?
Okay, or option C, which I'm really not a sports guy.
Yeah.
I am B, but swap out the football with something else. There is nothing attractive to me about going to the mall. Whatever the deal is, it's not worth it. It is not worth it.
Well, actually, there is one deal that's worth it.
Okay.
Because you guys are doing a Black Friday
Oh,
special
okay.
here at D6. That should be a good one.
You're right, and you're exactly right. But that kind of shopping I'll do, because this deal that we're offering, they can do right there from their tablet, their phone, or their computer.
What is your Black Friday deal? Let's preview it.
That's right. This is the Black Friday deal of the lifetime. This is D6 Plus at the ridiculously low price of $19 a month. You sign up, that is
slashing prices.
That is. It's $39 normally, $39.99 a month, and it is our fastest growing product. Again, just tremendous. I think the way I heard somebody state it recently, it is the one resource churches should not have. I said that backwards, Jeremy. It's the one resource that you must have. You cannot pass up. I don't know how I was trying to state that, but it's the one indispensable. It's not a very good no, it's not.
Pitch to say you shouldn't have it.
That's right. But D6 Plus, Jeremy, you were very instrumental in helping us create this. Let's just kind of bounce back and forth what they get here. But my favorite on this that I think people enjoy the most of is the having access to the vault of all these videos from all of our speakers throughout all the years of the D6 conference, as well as the MP3s, the audios of the breakouts.
It includes main stage, interviews,
that's
breakouts,
right. Yeah.
all of that stuff.
It does. So, I mean, can you imagine being able to play one of these speakers that you can't afford to bring into your church for your people on a service or for a parent's time, or maybe you have your own family event, you play 2 or 3 of them, and you just get together and have an incredible time, or use it for staff development or personal development. That's one service that
you
we
also
offer.
got great resources you can give straight to parents, right?
That's right. These are called the toolbox, where parents need to have the difficult conversations, and a lot of times they come out of pain points of life, crisis moments, difficulties, and they call up the pastor and say, "Hey, how do I explain terrorism to my kids? How do I explain the fact that my 12-year-old daughter just had a classmate commit suicide?" Or any number of, I think there's over 200 different topics that you have at your fingertips. You're searching. You just tell that parent on the phone, "Hey, here's how you talk through it. I'm sending you this PDF." And nothing in this entire resource of D6 Plus has our logo on it except the videos. That's the only ones that have our videos. Everything else will look like it comes from you, the church leader, as you pass it along. There are countdown videos that you can use. There are sermon starters, outlines that people use for like midweek programs. There's just teacher training, volunteer training videos that are 5 minutes long or less. And we write the intro emails for you to set them up, and you can customize them. And if you've got the ability with whether your iPhone or you've got a full-blown studio, you can recut those videos with you on camera because we give you the scripts. let you do it. So it's a phenomenal resource, and they're staged by age groups. So there's an adult channel, there's a student channel, there's a children's channel for the resources for adults, the resources for students, the resources for children, and you get all of it for $19 for as long as you're a subscriber. There's no long-term commitments. Jeremy, I heard you say this a long time ago, the phrase, hey, if you don't earn their business to keep them, then why have a contract? And so you can dump out at any time, but I can assure you once you sign on, it's a value you won't want to miss. And that's good for Black Friday only. So mark your calendars, Black Friday, $19. If you don't get in on then, it's going to be a little bit more than twice that price.
All right. So if that's something that interests you, and it probably should, make a note of that. And another thing that'll interest them is our guest today, Dan Darling. Tell us about Dan.
Yeah, Dan is quite as I listened to this interview, I didn't do the interview. And when I was listening to this, David Jones interviewed him, and Dan is part of a unique group. He is part of the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, also known as ERLC. And as I listened to Dan, they tackled a lot of issues, whether or not it's a Christian's view of politics, a Christian's view on immigration, Christian's view. And you know what? Those are very divisive, not the word I want to use, but a dividing line for a number of believers. And as I listened, there wasn't one single theme, and it caused my mind to just really engage and think through various areas, and I think it'll do the same thing for our audience today.
So I'll set this interview up. I was taken by the way he handled hard issues in a very gentle way. He seemed like a soft-spoken dude, and it was
extremely
really cool.
knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. And some people can't argue that way. They can't discuss that way. And he does that really, really well.
So after the break, we'll be with Daniel Darling. He'll be talking about his book, The Dignity Revolution.
Our team at D6 have put together top family ministry resources that will help you do family ministry well. We call it D6 Plus, an online monthly subscription for every age and stage of ministry. Adult, youth, and children's leaders can now enjoy ready-to-use family ministry resources and training from the team at D6 Family. What can you expect with D6 Plus? First, you get the D6 conference year-round, with a media library filled with main stage talks and breakout sessions from every year of the D6 conference. D6 Plus also provides teacher training videos and emails to help your team excel at family ministry. D6 Plus includes a toolbox of one-page talking sheets to guide families through pain points. D6 Plus also offers sermons and lesson outlines, countdown videos, and creative graphics. In addition to the resources and training provided online, D6 Plus members receive other perks, family ministry books sent directly to you throughout the year for free, plus special VIP benefits at the D6 conference. D6 Plus, family ministry resources and training to help you and the parents in your church have an excellent family ministry.
Today, we are joined by Daniel Darling. Daniel Darling is the Vice President of Communications for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. He is also a teaching pastor at Green Hill Church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. He's a contributor to several leading publications, and he's been featured in USA Today, The Huffington Post, and on The Morning Joe Show. Daniel is the author of several books, including his latest, The Dignity Revolution, and today we are talking about that topic of dignity. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Man, I'm glad to be here.
Well, your book, The Dignity Revolution, tremendous book, but it's one that I actually wish you didn't have to write because I wish that dignity wasn't such an important issue in our culture, or such a hot topic at least. But it is, and it's a huge issue. What was it about the issue that was so important that you decided to write a book about it?
Well, there's two things really that motivated me. One, I've always been struck by the way that Genesis talks about, really, the way that the whole Bible just talks about what it means to be human. You know, the kind of the rich language that the Bible uses about humanity, and starting in Genesis, where Moses kind of narrates the creation, where God speaks into existence all of creation, but then Moses really slows down when he talks about the way that God created humans and uses language like God sculpted humans from the dust of the ground, breathes into humans the breath of life, and makes humans in his image. And then you have the Trinitarian language that, let us make man in our image. So, just the care with which God creates humans is, to me, is just amazing, especially at a time when people are asking, what does it mean to be human? Mm-hmm. Whether it's due to technology or sort of other innovations or things going on in the culture that are increasingly people are saying, what does it mean to be human? But I also think, secondly, Christians really, I think, need to recover a holistic vision of human dignity. I think we're tempted in every generation to not see certain groups of people, to pass by them and not see their humanity. Or we're tempted to maybe prioritize one group of vulnerable humans over another, right? So people like me who are very, very passionately pro-life and see the humanity of the unborn, and they have people who are passionate for justice issues, for immigrants and minority populations. And it doesn't seem like at times those two groups can talk to each other when they're really coming at those issues from the same premise, that humans are created in the image of God. So I really wanted to help Christians recover a holistic vision of human dignity, and not just about how we think about our neighbors, but also how we think about ourselves, because I think that's important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in the introduction of your book, you say that your book is for those that find themselves without any home in the political parties of the nation. Why should Christians feel like people without a home in today's political landscape?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, on the one hand, I do think as Christians who, if we are commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves, we don't have an option of not being involved at some level in politics. Doesn't mean we all have to be pundits or politicians, but I don't think we have an option to not be involved, particularly because we share part of the power, right? So Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself. How can I love my vulnerable neighbors, if I don't use the voice that I have to speak up for them in a sort of representative republic like ours? So I think that's very important. And then you go to Romans 13 and talks about how God will hold leaders accountable. I think he's going to also hold us accountable too, because we share in the power. So on the one hand, I think we have to be involved. On the other hand, even though I think we should join institutions and some people should join parties, I think is very important, we should never feel completely at home in any earthly movement. Peter says that we're strangers and sojourners, or strangers and exiles. So if we feel completely at home in any earthly movement, it could be that we're being formed by that movement instead of by the Scriptures. And we should always see ourselves first as citizens of the kingdom of God. So if, at some level, whatever party we're part of, or movement or tribe, if our status as a citizen of the kingdom of God is not rubbing up against that, if we're not at some level uncomfortable, then I think we should re-examine who really has first place in our lives.
Now, politics today have gotten so nasty. They've gotten so dirty. I mean, when I see things come across my Twitter feed, I just want to block people or mute people.
Yeah.
When I see it on TV, I turn it. I'm like, I just want to zone out and I watch sports. But in your book, you kind of talk about how some of these things that we see as political issues are also dignity issues. Can you talk about that a little bit and what that means?
Yeah.
And for us as the church especially.
I mean, I do think there's a way in which we can get so wrapped up in sort of the outrage of the day that we do get off track, right? So I don't think that Christians have to be constantly rage tweeting and mad about what's going on in the world. In fact, there was a discussion on Twitter today. This will be old news by the time this comes out, but it'll probably come up again. Why are people silent about this or that? And it's like, just because people are not communicating the same time you are, with the same anger you are, at the same issue you are, on a 10-year-old medium called Twitter, does not mean they're being silent about it. So on the one hand, we don't have to get caught up in that and in the news cycle and let that form us and catechize us. On the other hand, I think it's easy for us to look at everything through a partisan lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and this is the temptation for every generation. If you think about the parable that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan, the religious leaders who passed by, they were formed by their tribe or their movement to not see the man on the side of the road. And there's certain people, because of the movement or tribe that we're in, we're catechized to not see, right? So if you are a conservative like I am and vote conservatively, there's going to be certain people groups that if you speak up for them, people in your movement are going to question your purity and your bona fides, right? Sometimes if you talk about race, sometimes you talk about immigration. On the other hand, if you are, someone who's more progressive, and if you speak up about the justice or the injustice against the unborn, if you speak up about religious liberty, which is I think a human dignity issue, then you're going to be called into question by your tribe. And so I think we need to see these things as human dignity issues. We need to let the scriptures kind of be our guide, which means sometimes we're going to land in different places depending on what the issue is, and we have to be willing to do that.
Yeah, and on that issue, we have younger evangelicals today who are speaking up about issues of race and poverty and human trafficking, but maybe not as much about the unborn. And then we have older generations that are speaking up about the unborn, about being pro-life, but maybe not talking about as much about issues like race and poverty. Why are evangelicals having such a tough time taking a holistic approach to dignity right now?
Because I just think, again, I think we're formed by the tribes that we're in, or, here's what happens is, you might enter a movement because of one issue, right? So I got in politics, got involved and started paying attention to politics and voting conservatively, primarily because of the pro-life issue, from an early age, seeing that here's this system in this country that allows the unborn to be killed, and just seeing the humanity, the dignity of the unborn, that there's a person there, there's a human being there. That kind of brought me into conservative politics. Some people got into politics because they care about refugees or they care about race. So sometimes that entry point, you come in because of that issue, and then you find who thinks the same way as I do. If we're not careful, we let that tribe form us in everything else, right? So just because I'm pro-life doesn't mean I'm taking the whole ball of wax of everything every conservative believes, or just because I care about adoption or refugees or something doesn't mean I'm going to swallow everything I hear from the progressive side. I think we just always have to be wise to say, what does the scripture say about this? What does the Bible say about these things?
And kind of going along with that, I don't want to go too much down the road on politics,
right.
But I do think what your book does and what you do at the ERLC is you help people think biblically about issues. You don't necessarily tell them what to think. You help them learn how to think about these things from a Christian worldview. Kind of an example of this, one of the biggest issues facing our country right now is immigration. It seems like if you have compassion for children in detention centers, you're automatically a radical liberal. If you think we need to protect our borders, you're automatically a right-wing nut. And we're so overloaded with the politics of it all that we forget the dignity aspect that's involved. When it comes to issues like immigration or other issues of that sort, how can we view things biblically? Where do we need to start so that we're going from biblical principles in a Christian worldview and not just going along with that tribalism that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think one of the things Christians need to do is at a high level, I think first of all, separate sometimes the policy-making aspect and the sort of high-level view of people. So, good Christians are going to disagree on the specifics of border policy, right? I mean, and kind of where the limits should be on immigration. How many limits we should have? What specific measures should we do at the border? I think all Christians should agree that we need to have some kind of policy, right? We need to have some kind of limits. Our nation can't take in everybody. We can't, we have to have some border policy. I think all Christians should also agree that human beings are created in the image of God, right? That asylum seekers and migrants, whether or not they're eligible to come into the country, should be treated with care and dignity. Right? They are people. And so I think we do need to avoid rhetoric that kind of looks at immigrants as less than human, as a people group that is kind of an obstacle to our flourishing. So I think we need to really avoid that rhetoric. And so those are things that we should all agree on. When it comes to the specifics, good people are going to disagree. I mean, there's a lot of these issues where, you get two policymakers in the room who both agree that human beings have dignity, that we should treat migrants well, and that we should have some kind of border policy. But they might disagree on where that is. I think we really, I don't think anybody on either side thinks that our immigration system is working well. I think everyone agrees that it's broken. So we just really need to pray that our leaders will come together and really do their jobs and do the hard work of hammering out policies that are, that are good. But yeah, I think we have to hold, tightly the idea of how we think about human beings, how we think about immigrants and refugees, and treating them as human beings, and hold loosely maybe our opinions on the specific ways of solving these issues, right? And we're not all experts on policy, right?
Right.
Although if you go onto Twitter, everyone's an expert on every single kind of policy, right?
All you got to do is sign up, and you get that PhD in whatever you want.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and on that topic, I mean, people take to social media, and those disagreements that you mentioned suddenly become inflamed and just turn out into, people are just lobbing bombs at each other. A study from Barna that just came out this week revealed that U.S. adults believe hate speech has increased mostly online. Mm-hmm. I know that this is a topic that you're passionate about. I believe you actually have a book coming out next year
I'm working
on this very topic. Yeah. What's causing people, Christians included, to act out online in ways they never would in person?
I think there's a few things. I think I'm actually persuaded by the argument that Alan Jacobs puts forth in his book, How to Think, that the farther you get from one-on-one conversation, the easier it is to be more uncivil, right? And so if you even go back, he even talks about the reformers. If you go back to the invention of the printing press, right? You read some of even Martin Luther, who I love, some of his polemics, they're pretty heated because there's a removal, right? He talks about how the invention of the printing press and the post office separated people, right? So you can write that nasty letter and you don't see that person face to face. I think the internet has done that even more because you feel like you're there's a kind of a weird feeling that you feel anonymous and you feel safe by commenting or tweeting or posting something from the anonymity of your screen. And I think what we do is we just forget that the person on the other side of the screen that we're interacting with is a human being. Mm-hmm. We're not arguing with avatars. We're not arguing with principles. We're arguing with people created in the image of God. The people we disagree with are not the sum total of their arguments, right?
Right, yeah.
So someone can have a very, very, I could disagree with someone very strongly. They can, perhaps they have wrong views. I think there are wrong views. And yet that's not the sum total of who they are. They're people. They're whole people. So I think forgetting that makes us more uncivil online. I also think there's a kind of projection that's happening when people go online. There's a kind of projecting on like a online profile that fills in the gaps of what we know we're missing in our real life, right? So if you're sort of timid and shy and you've never been known for courage, it's real easy to go online and kind of be the bombastic guy who is arguing with everybody. I've noticed that. I've met some people who are incredibly bombastic online, and I meet them, and they're super like chill and almost kind of meek. Or we might want to try to project that, hey, I want everyone to know that I'm the kind of person who has these right views, right? Just so everybody knows I'm on the right side of this all the time. It could be parenting, it could be politics, it could be all these things. We sort of want to project, I want you to think that I'm this kind of person. And I think the really solution to that, not to totally Jesus juke everybody, but when we understand that we're known by God and we know God and that he knows us for who we really are, not our avatar that we project, and that confidence, we don't have to try to be something we're not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think a lot of that is fueled by this kind of projection and really just not seeing the humanity of the person we're interacting with. I also think we confuse tweeting with activism. We think I got mad on Twitter, therefore I'm active. I have found in our policy and advocacy work that I do think public speech is important, and sometimes tweets are effective, right? From high-profile people on specific issues. But for the most part, the best kind of advocacy is actually done behind the scenes, working across party lines, building coalitions to try to get things done. The best, I mean, you'll ask anybody in D.C., the most effective legislators are ones who are rarely in front of the camera. They're just behind the scenes crafting legislation, doing the hard work. So, you know, this weird idea that I tweeted, therefore I'm doing something, you're actually not doing that much, just to be honest. There's probably more people in local communities doing more for that issue who are not even, probably don't have a Twitter account, than me being rage tweeting all day, basically.
I think in your book you said it's not activism, it's slacktivism.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
That made me laugh out loud when I read that. Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that we're not having those one-on-one conversations anymore. Some people have said we've lost our love for our neighbor because we don't even know our next door neighbor anymore like we used to. How do we get that back? Or can we? Have we gone so far that we can't get the 1950s back and how we knew everybody on our block?
Well, you know, just to plug another book I'm reading, I'm in the middle of this book by Tim Carney called Alienated America, and he makes a very persuasive case that of the loss of civil society in many of our communities, that from a variety of factors, you know, factories leaving or employers leaving and people not having that connectedness at work that, you know, bonds people together, and then churches closing in some of these communities. I think that's really important. We did some surveying on civility as well, and I think that has a lot to do with it too. I'm encouraged though that you know, the church is best positioned to actually lead on this issue. Even though there's a lot of criticism of the church and the way Christians interact online, the church is the one place where people should be meeting on Sunday who might not have too much in common, but they have what they have in common is their faith in Christ. Mm-hmm. And so I do think churches should try to promote more civil discourse in their local communities, in their local cities. You know, I think of Jeremiah 29, where he talks about seeking the welfare of the city, for in the city's flourishing, you'll flourish. And I think it really is talking about the sort of bonds of civil society that keep people together, people talking at the barbershop and talking in the diners and, you know, hanging out in these third places. And ultimately, we feel like in the church. What encourages me is that on Sundays when I go to church, most of the people in my congregation are not arguing online. They don't know the last 15 Christian controversies on Twitter. They're just normal people. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's refreshing. If all I knew about the church was what I read online, I would just be so discouraged. But the church is vastly bigger than that, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of a roundabout answer to your question.
Yeah.
But some conversations should not happen online. I mean, some of these things should be civil, in person, one-on-one, you know, talking with people with whom we disagree and learning from them. You may not change your opinion, but it'll become more nuanced and you'll understand where somebody's coming from, mm-hmm. rather than automatically sort of, you know, Twitter and Facebook to a certain extent incentivize us to sort of project, hey, I'm in the right tribe. I'm in this right group. I just want you to know I'm not like this person. Even when someone tweets something really dumb, like a Christian leader tweets something stupid, the impulse for everyone to quote tweet it and say something self-righteous to make sure everyone knows they're not them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think we have to guard against that tendency as well.
Yeah, and I'm amazed at how much it's just accelerated. You and I have had our squabbles online over very innocent things.
Yes.
You are a Chicago Cubs fan, and I'm
Amen.
a St. Louis Cardinals fan.
Yes.
And even now it's gotten to the point where I'm hesitant to joke around with people in kind of a joking way about that stuff, because other people will jump in and suddenly words are flying your way that you've never heard in public, and you're thinking, wow, that was
that escalated quickly.
Yes, exactly.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. You can't even post anymore about like some innocent thing, because someone will be like, "Why are you doing this when kids are in cages and unborn babies are?" It's like, okay,
Yeah.
It's weird. I remember when Twitter first came out, we were all like, who wants to read about what someone ate all day? Like, we're all just gonna be posting about what we ate.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that would be awesome if that's all that.
Oh, yes. Well, we know that when it comes to these issues of dignity, Hollywood's going to have their opinion, the government's going to have their opinion, and they're going to try to indoctrinate us. They're going to try to indoctrinate our children. When it comes to parents and ministry leaders, though, how can they adopt this biblical view of dignity and pass it down to their kids and future generations so they're hearing it from the Christian worldview and not what Hollywood or Miley Cyrus has to say about what's going on?
Well, I think first of all, we have to be intentional with our children. Both as parents, Baptists generally don't like to use the word catechism because it's like that strikes us as more, mainline Protestant or Catholic. But the original idea of just forming our kids, I think we have to be intentional about that. We can't just assume our kids are going to be discipled on their own. I mean, our kids are actually going to be discipled. The question is it going to be us doing it or somebody else? Which I know y'all care very deeply about because you have D6 conference that equips people that way. But we have to be intentional about forming our kids and discipling them in these issues, teaching them what does it mean to be created in the image of God? What does it mean that you are created in the image of God? What does it mean to see your neighbor that way? And just intentionally teaching our kids the Bible and the key doctrines of the Christian life. I think that's so important as parents and also as churches and church leaders, as to supplement what parents are doing and to teach those kids that don't have stable family lives that might be the only teaching they get. I also think we need to model it in our families and in our churches. And what I mean by that is we say we believe that every human being has dignity and worth. But if in our families there are certain groups of people that we're okay sort of sidelining or disparaging, or even as parents, if the things we say we value, right, are, if we only value our children for their performance and not for who they actually are, then we're sending a subtle message that you're the sum total of your performance. And, so we have to be wise about that. And in our churches, really, we may say that we value every human being, but if, sometimes the way we market church is, hey, we want the young, we want the hip, we want the cool. We only want we want young families, and we deeply care about the next generation. But in the church should be the one place where you're valued because you're an image bearer of God and you're a child of the King, right? So that person in your church who has dementia, who doesn't remember his wife's name, who can't serve on a deacon board or elder board, who can't contribute that much, should be as valuable to your body as that young business owner who comes in, who can give lots of money and who could give a lot of his time, or as that mom who's really connected and can do all these things. So I think we have to be really wise. I heard a church a few months ago that kicked off a guy off their worship team because his hair was starting to gray. Eesh. And the message was, well, that's kind of not the look we're going for.
Oh, no.
I was like, well, that's kind of the look the kingdom of God is going for, you right? That, so all of us in our churches would all be dead set against euthanasia and death with dignity. But we can send a message that, hey, once you get a little older, we don't really want you. You're not valuable here. We want the young and the hip and the cool, right? So I think creating those environments really teach our children a lot about what we think about human dignity.
Well, this issue of human dignity is one that's not going away, and it's going to be just really at the forefront of everything going forward. I would encourage you to pick up a copy of The Dignity Revolution. It's not just a book, it really is a handbook. You've heard Dan talk about some of the issues today, but when it comes to issues like abortion, immigration, dealing with the elderly in the church, race, poverty, injustice in the system, those things are all covered in the book. And I just found it incredibly helpful to help me think about these issues as a Christian, as a father, as a son, as a husband. It really does a lot. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you being here. And as bad as Twitter can be, I do encourage you to follow Dan on Twitter at Dan Darling. He is one of the most thoughtful people when it comes to Twitter, because when an issue breaks, I usually go to Twitter to find his account because I want to see what he has said about it. Because if I'm angry, if like just anger is boiling over me and I want to call that righteous indignation or whatever it may be, I can go to his account usually and see what he has said about it, and I kind of cool down a little bit. I'm feeling better. So I appreciate you, not only what you do for writing, what you do for your job, but also what you model on Twitter. A little humor and sarcasm mixed in there as well.
It's okay to be funny and sort of not take yourself too seriously, right?
Yeah, I could do without the Cubs tweets.
Yes.
But
if you could put up with the Cubs tweets and during the NFL season, and really when the NBA offseason with everyone, all these trades, if you can put up with the sports tweets, I think you'll be okay.
Well, once again, pick up a copy of The Dignity Revolution. You will not regret it.
Thank you to Daniel Darling for covering, like I said, tough topics in a really cool and gentle way.
Absolutely. Love it, love it, love it. Next week, you want to tell us who we have, Jeremy?
Next week, we have Sharon Hottie Miller, and she has written a book about being nice. And I'm going to buy that book for you as a Christmas present, so it'll be nice.
I know. You better buy it in audio form for me.
Thank you guys for listening. Next week, we'll have Sharon Hottie Miller, and we'll be talking about being nice. And hope you guys will join us, and hope you have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.